Hello guys, welcome back to the simple MVC database project. Over the past week, I know I haven't made any videos, but I have improved on the code a lot. So let's get started. For starters, I've created some variables for the three inputs we have for our table. So for the first name, last name, and email, these are going to be string variables that I've initialized to none. I've also created a table ID set to 0. This will track which record in our table is being used currently, so we can query it or remove it, delete it, or insert one. The OS system is just to clean the terminal, and let's move on. So I've created functions. Let me just collapse these. I've created functions for each operation that I would want to do using my database. These functions are going to connect with the GUI script, which I'm going to create in the next video with Ktinker, and those will be the user interface. So for starters, I've updated the createdatabase. It still has the 4 lines, the connect, the cursor, the commit, and closed method. These 4 methods are in each and every single one of the functions I've created, and you need these 4 lines in order to interact with your database. But I have improved the create function, the create table function. It now creates a table if not exists. We still have testing for our name. I've added the integer. This is our tracking ID. And then the next 3 are the text, which I went over in the last video. So I can call this, and every time I do, well, let me just run this and show you. So right now in our folder, I don't have the database because I deleted it. But when I run this, our database is created first try. However, when I run this again, nothing happens because the database is already there, and the if not exists argument prevents a repeat of a database. I'm not sure if I went this over before, but I'm going over this now. Next, we have the show table. This will c.execute, select everything from our database or our table within our database. First try is the name of the database, but inside there's a table called testing. It will fetch everything and store that to a variable called items. And then for each item it will print it. I went over this the last time in the last video, but now it's saved to a specific function, which is called here at the end. So I don't have to call it automatically when the whole script is run. Now for the insert function, I have the connections to the variables I've created. Each of them are a global instance, but initialized in this function. Basically, when the function runs, this connects to the variable using the global command, and then saves the variables that we're inserting into the function temporarily into the variables, and then we can use them to insert them into our database. So here I'm just taking the first name, last name, and email from the arguments in the function and connecting it to the variables here, lines 18 through 20, through 120 I mean. So here we have our SQLite connect and cursor. Now here I've created a way to count the number of rows in order to calculate the table ID. So row count will count the number of rows from our testing database. It will fetch the first item, which will be the ID. It's the first one that we'll be inserting. And once it finds that number, it will increment it because we're inserting a new table by using the insert function. Not sure if that made too much sense yet, but you will once I execute this as an example. So now I've saved all the arguments into a variable called parameters, and then the list of parameters is inserted into the execute function. The arguments for this function insert into the table are values. I have 4 question marks, and these question marks will map the inputs within parameters into each question mark location. So the first question mark will map to table ID. The second question mark will map to first name. The third will map to last name, and then the final one will map to the email as per their order, and then it closes the connection. So let me show you how this looks. Let me just uncomment this. So here it's going to insert for the first name 2, last name man, and 2man@gmail.com is the email. So when I run this, in our table we now have the ID, which is 1, first name is 2, last name is man, and tm@gmail is the email. So let me run the insert function one more time. I'll show you what happens. Random boy, and let me change the email a little bit. Save that, and now let's run this. Now our table has another item. This time it has the ID of 2. Even though I did not put the ID 2 in here, it's calculating that using the, where is it? By using lines 128 to 130, it's calculating the table ID on its own to output here as 2, and it saves the inputted first name, last name, and email. So let me try it one more time. Anonymous penguin ap@gmail.com, and when I run this, we now have our third entry with the ID of 3, first name, last name, and email. So that's how the insert function works. Just one sec. Sorry, I was just having some tea. Okay, now the next function I want to go over is the update function. So by using the insert function, we can only add items to our table. We cannot edit any of the items here. So for that, I've created the update function. For that, we will call the specific row by its ID number, and then change the variables. So the first name, I could write something else, the last name something else, and even change the email. And for the ID number called, it will change the information in there. So let me show you that one. So like before, it connects to the global variables and assigns them the arguments inserted into the function. This time it also takes the order ID. Here's our connection and cursor. So now the execute function has changed. So now we're using the update argument, updating the table testing, set the first name to a variable first name. This is an argument variable. Last name to an argument last name, email to an argument email, where, which is an important argument keyword. The ID is the table ID. The table ID, these four sub variables or string variables are assigned over here. So with the comma and curly brackets, the first variable is assigned our first name, which is our variable, our global variable. Last name is assigned our global last name variable. Email is assigned our global email, but the table ID is assigned the order ID, which is not the global variable, it's just straight from the function. The reason I assigned first, last, and email to the global variable is so I can modify them later on when connecting them to the GUI script. But for the purpose of the update function itself, the order ID doesn't need to be saved here as a variable. But yeah, where the ID equals the order ID that we put in, it's going to go to where this ID is and then change the first, last, and email address because of the set command and the update command. Then closes the connection. So let me show you how this works. Actually, hang on. Let me just show you an example of how it runs without changing anything. So now the insert function has been used. These are my items. Let me just run it again. these items are now saved in this database. So now that I use the update function, it's going to call the table the order ID of 1, which will be the first one, the to-man@gmail.com, and it will change the first name to Apple, second name to man. Let me change this to woman, just to make it separate from man, and then the Gmail will be changed to am@gmail.com instead of tm. So when I run this, the first entry is now changed, applewoman@am@gmail.com. And if I were to do this with number 2, to man, I guess, just as a quick example, or atm@gmail.com. If I run this, our second value is now changed. So this is how we can update the table using the update function, and it should work the same for item 3 as well. Now the last thing I want to show you is the delete function. Well, second last thing. The delete function only takes the order ID. So over here, if I were to run this function, it would delete the second item in our table, not the first or third. I'll show you that in a second. So it has the same connection code, connection cursor. The only thing that's different is the delete functionality in the middle. I've created a variable called entry. It will take in the order ID from the function argument and add a comma to it and save it as a tuple. And then the c.execute uses the delete from keywords, testing, which is our table, where, so it's going to look for the ID equals question mark, and for the question mark I have the tuple where the order ID comes from. So SQLite will just use the delete function that's built in to delete the item. So let's run this. This will delete the second item in our table. So I run it. Now we only have items 1 and 3. If I were to delete the first one and run it, it's deleted the first one, leaving us only the third item, the third row. I can run it again, nothing will happen. And then I use 3 to delete the last item. And now our table is empty. There we go. And then show table, I think I went over that. It's the same code I had in the last video. And this print function is the same thing I had in the show table. I just wanted to do this with the variables in the top here, just to show if they were updating properly with the functions. They are. I don't really need to show that again. Now the last function I have here is the query function. This one sort of does the same thing as the show tables. Actually, it's meant to kind of be the same function, because query will go through your table and pull out data that's stored there in order to use it, or modify it, or show it. But the show table function is just for the terminal over here. The query function is going to do the same thing, but I'm going to connect this to the GUI script, which I will make in the next video. So for now, I'm just going to leave it as the same function. It has the same functionality right now as the show table, so I think I'll leave it the same as the other one for now. So that's all I wanted to go over in terms of updates for the project. In the next video, I will make the GUI script with Ktinker and show you some progress on that. Yeah, that's all there is really for the time being. I hope you guys have a good one. Peace out.